some terrible suffering in my life that comes, it seems, from Satan himself. And I've pleaded with God to take it away from me. And God says, my grace is sufficient for you. I am not going to heal you. I'm not going to take away this suffering. I'm not going to remove it from you. I am going to give you me. And that's it. And Paul is cool with that. He says, because of that, now God's glory can be revealed in my life in an even greater way than it could be before. Christ's power can be revealed in my life in an even greater way than it could be before. I want to illustrate this to you. Imagine, if you would, 3 people. Person A is raised in a running family. His mom and dad are both runners. They've got the runner's build, they've got the runner's genetics, they've got the runner's lungs. They've been running for their whole lives pretty much. And they each have run marathons and triathlons and all kinds of things. They just have the pedigree. And then person A is the son of this couple. And from earliest days, this person would ride in the stroller as mom and dad would go on for their 10-mile-long runs. And as soon as that child could begin to walk and run, they would get him out of the stroller and he would run alongside them for half a mile, maybe 2 miles eventually, until one of these days down the road, as he was in high school, he was running 10 miles at a stretch and 15 miles at a stretch. And they were running together as a family, until eventually he reached his 20s and he went to college and he met a man who said, I've got a special training regimen that I think will take you to another level. And so he goes to this coach and he enters into this training regimen, and part of the training regimen is a Power Zone power bar. And so this guy eats the Power Zone power bar and he gets all the energy he needs, and he goes through the training regimen, and by the time he's 25 years old, he competes in an Ironman triathlon and completes it. That's a story of amazing success, wouldn't you say? Well, what about person B? Person B is a person who, you know, they had polio when they were a child, and they were in a particular situation long enough ago where the vaccine wasn't available to them, and they had polio as a child, and it kind of damaged their legs. But through therapy and surgery, throughout years and years of effort, they were able to get to a point of being able to run and jog and participate in cross-country events and things like that. And lo and behold, this person comes to a man who says, I can coach you, and I've got a Power Zone bar that'll help you. And with the help of this coach and the Power Zone bar, this guy who used to have polio now has just completed running a marathon. What an amazing story that would be. Or let's take person C. Person C has cerebral palsy. And when he was 5 years old, his parents were in a car accident and he wasn't properly strapped in because of the way the palsy made his body react. And in the accident, he lost his right leg from the knee down. And so person C has no legs, cerebral palsy, and has struggled through life just to be able to use a prosthetic to walk. Eventually, by the time he turns 18, he is diagnosed with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, and his lungs begin to fill up with fibrous masses and he can barely breathe. And 2 weeks before he dies, he finds a man who has a power bar. And that man says, eat this power bar and let's train. And 2 weeks before he dies, with the help of the power bar and just a couple days of this man's training, the guy with cerebral palsy and only one leg and Lou Gehrig's syndrome is able to complete a 10K run, and then 2 weeks later dies. Which of those stories is more compelling of an advertisement for the power bar? The guy, the last one, the guy who was raised in the family and just, ended up running something, or the guy who went through a little bit of hardship and was able to complete something, or the guy who had absolutely nothing and suffered after suffered. You know this every time you ever see anything on television related to track. Every single time there's a long distance runner, the news media will highlight the person who's had the hardest road to get to that point. And they will highlight that person's coach, they will highlight that person's training regimen, they will highlight that person's everything that goes into making that person who that person is. And all those things get greater glory because of the hardship that that person is facing. And check this out. The people in this world who face greater degrees of hardship and struggle and yet find strength in God are greater advertisements for how good God actually is. The more of those people there are in this world who suffer big and yet trust big, the more people there are like that, the greater God's fame becomes in the world, the greater his glory becomes. And so here is the question that challenges all of us, especially here in America, where we like to sanitize ourselves. We don't like germs on our hands. We don't like suffering in our lives. We like to sanitize ourselves from everything. What if God wants some suffering to come into your life so that he gets greater glory? That's the question we're afraid of. I want to worship God with my music, but I don't want to face suffering. I don't want to be one of those people who has to be faithful in the midst of pain. I don't want that. And the problem I have with pain and suffering in this world is that I know I don't want it on me. And if I admit to myself that maybe God allows it in this world because it brings him glory, then I must admit to myself that maybe one of these days he's going to use me in the same way. And it's hard for me to trust a God like that. This is a difficult thing for us. But I want to share with you just a couple final thoughts before I entertain some of your questions. Here's this one. If God exists, then he himself and his glory are the most infinitely valuable good. Check this out. If he exists, he himself and his glory are the most infinitely valuable good. Write that down, because we like to see things from our own perspective. And from our own perspective, we've got a level of good that's this high, and we've got a level that's evil that's this high. And we like to compare the two. And good is here and evil is here, and we got to sort of compare the two and deal with those two things. But with God, his glory all by itself is infinitely higher than anything else we've ever experienced. And check this out. If God wants the best for you, part of that process means for us to realize how infinitely valuable he is, how far above all other things he is. Because you and I chase after so many stupid things. We chase after television shows and sports teams and possessions and candy bars. We chase after stupid things. And God is like, I am the most amazing thing you will ever know. And in order for us to realize his glory really is that great, we have to see it in people's lives. And sometimes we have to experience it in our own lives. Because that is the most infinitely valuable good. And if he wants the best for you, he wants you to get connected to it. But what amazes me is not